Hi, my name is Megan Hunter, as you just mentioned, and I am an attorney with Fairshake Environmental Legal Services. So first I want to say just a little bit about who we are. We've been in existence for 5 years now. So for 5 years we've been working in Appalachia, mainly in Ohio and Pennsylvania, a little bit in West Virginia, and we hope to work more in West Virginia. But we're a law firm designed to serve modest means clients on environmental matters. And we were created because our executive director saw such an immense need for legal services, environmental legal services, specifically in Appalachia, the Appalachia of her home. She is from Tuscarawas County, Ohio, so the foothills. And she founded Fairshake to try to start to address some of that need. So we work on a sliding scale based on income down to pro bono services on all kinds of environmental matters. So I think it's important to introduce who my clients are, who our clients are. So we represent individuals, we represent community groups, and we also represent some of the large nonprofits, small nonprofits as well. But by and large, most of who we represent, most of our clients and who I'm working with on a daily basis are individual folks. They are modest means, hardworking people of Appalachia that they're used to making do with the hand they were dealt in this life and doing the best they can with that hand. And they get to a situation where they can no longer make it work, right? Most of us make it work on the day-to-day. We figure out how we're going to manage our life, how we're going to get to work, how we're going to go where we need to go. And in most of our clients' situations, something happens so that no longer works. So in just a few examples of what that might look like, because it looks different for everyone, what environmental impact looks like. You might see a client where they had a perfectly functional drinking water well. It was great. Well pad comes in, hydraulic fracturing operation happens, and then suddenly there's sediment all in the lines, the drinking water isn't working anymore, the well's not working. It could be a situation a mine comes in. Again, drinking water suddenly disappeared, the well was fine, now there's no drinking water. It could be one day, maybe I wanted to lease my mineral rights, but today's not the day. And here I am having my mineral rights stolen from me by a private company through a state order to go ahead and develop them now for the compensation that the state has decided is acceptable. That's a very real thing that happens in Ohio. My understanding is it also happens in West Virginia. So I should say I am an Ohio licensed attorney. I should also give the usual disclaimer that I am not giving out legal advice today, but more information. And I think what I'm here to speak to is, first of all, our outreach program, which is something new that we're doing, but also a bit about what it is to work as an attorney in this framework, in the sense of being someone and being a firm who is trying to get justice for people who are suffering negative environmental impacts, who are trying to get justice through the law, and letting you know what that looks like and what that means, and as our 5 years have shown us, how hard that is. And the outreach program was designed precisely to try to combat that problem of how hard that is. So let's take our landowner who had a perfectly working well. Everything's fine. Well pad comes in, sedimentation happens, no longer a working well. So I think some people hear that fact scenario, and I know a lot of clients hear that fact scenario, and they think this is a clear-cut case. The timing lines up. I should be able to get justice here. The company even bought me water this whole time. It's clear. They know that it's their fault. The reality is they have an expert that will say it is not their fault. If the state also says it is not their fault, then it is on you to be able to prove that it is their fault. And that takes a lot of money typically, because you need an expert to be able to do that. Because your knowledge of your property and your life, it just doesn't carry the same weight in court as an expert from out of state. So, or an expert from in-state for that matter, an expert that someone else had the ability to hire, or an expert that's sitting on the staff of your own government. So our outreach program well, let me take a step back. So those are some of the things that our individual clients deal with. Our community group clients, they're more often facing some type of infrastructure is coming in, and they don't want it to come in. They've got concerns. They don't want that injection well to come in. They don't want that compressor station to come in. They're worried about property values. They're worried about pollution. So let's take an example of compressor station. They're worried about air emissions, right? They think this thing shouldn't come in, so they go to make their case to the local officials. Well, what you will find with any one of these pieces of infrastructure is before you even knew it was coming into your community, the polluter who's coming into your community, they knew they were coming in. They've been working for a really long time to get scientists in line and show that this is exactly it's going to be fine. It's going to meet all the regulations. And they have people on staff, or they have hired outside people who that's their full-time job, is to make sure that whatever the polluter wants to do will meet the application requirements, that they will prove that it's okay to do that. Meanwhile, community members are living their lives. They get wind of something that's coming into their community, and we've got some concerns about this. And that's when you realize that you're too late to the game. You're in the middle of the permitting process. Somebody's, Ohio EPA in my case, or, West Virginia DEP is about to hand out an air permit for something with significant emissions, and you're trying to figure out what is this even? And by and large, that's how this happens again and again and again. We deal with communities who they didn't have even a shot to develop a record because they didn't know what they needed to develop a record for. So our outreach program is hoping to get in there with communities and provide counsel on how to develop that record for yourself. So when a threat does come, because they always come, the threat will come. I grew up in Eastern North Carolina. I am not from Appalachia. And, threats come there too. They just look different. And when a community is not prepared, it makes it just an uphill battle, and it makes what is achievable very different. So our outreach program is designed to make sure you will be prepared when the problem comes. And hopefully, because of that preparation, you will be able to have more of a say in what is going to come into your community. And of course, we all know that's where things get tricky, right? Is having a say, having people listen to our concerns because of that very real problem that individuals' experience and personal knowledge is not given the weight that I think most of us know it deserves. So there are maps on everybody's table, and I think that those are for use later, but I did want to mention that Fairshake will have more information about us at a table set up in the back, and we'll have a map up. And what I would like people to do is to start to think about what information would you need about your own community to be able to stand up for it. So, Fairshake can help in explaining that in terms of, how courts think about things, how policymakers think of things, what the law is required to assess and what it's not. But I think it's really important to do that initial evaluation of what are even the resources that we have in our community? What do we value? What are our strengths? Where are the creeks located? Where's our drinking water intake? Where are the current air monitors? How good is our air? All of those things are the type of assessment that we will be helping communities to do of themselves to help them be better prepared to stand up to industry before it comes in. And it should also be acknowledged, as many people have mentioned, life here is already life with industry, right? You know this. And so when you're doing that assessment, it's also about assessing what are the current environmental effects going on here. What legacy, where's the legacy pollution here? Where are old mine sites? Are they leaking? What are we working with now? And the fact that that is your now, that's just the reality. That's not a reason to make anything worse. So I want to emphasize that really strongly. If someone ever says that in terms of legally, that's not a reason to just degrade things further, ever. And I think I want people to know that doing this exercise is so critical in terms of collecting data on your natural environment, in terms of also just collecting, well, how do you engage with your natural environment? Do you know someone that goes and sits at a creek and they notice a certain type of fish every day there and that's what they like to do some days? That matters. That actually matters legally. We're lucky in that we still do have some environmental laws that are really powerful. We do have the Clean Water Act. It's incredibly powerful. What the Clean Water Act does is any existing use of a water body, a surface water body, cannot be degraded. So no one can do something that's going to take away that use. So you need to know what your uses are. Is there a certain type of mussel that you see? Do you like to fly fish? All these things that might seem like they don't matter to someone, you'll be surprised to find that sometimes they actually really do matter, and sometimes legal action can be based on them. But we can't do that if we're not in contact with each other, if we're not talking to each other, if we don't understand what our interests and our values and how we actually are living our day-to-day life, what that looks like, right? So I think that's part of what a mapping exercise can really do. What do you value on that map? So these maps on the tables, I think, have slightly different boundaries than the one Bearshake will put up. But we're hoping that you'll take a moment to use the dry erase pen and stick a dot on something you value, a stream, or a church you frequent, a park, anything that is a place that has value to you. Your home, right? Your home. Your yard where you like to garden. And to start to look at what that looks like beside the other pieces of infrastructure that people want to come in. And do you want them to? Do you want them to? And under what terms? So I'll stop. I'm not going to quite stop rambling yet. Actually, I know today's about visioning. That's what today is about. So when you're visioning, I think one of the things that you might not initially think about is accountability and justice. What is your vision of accountability? What does that look like? When you call your government, how do they respond? And what does that mean to call your government? Who do you call? If I have concerns about radioactive brine being spread on my road, and I call someone in Ohio, I might get sent to ODNR, I might get thrown to Ohio EPA, I might get thrown to the Ohio Department of Health. And they might do that again and again and again, and I never get any answers. And I hear those stories in Pennsylvania and West Virginia where you try to reach out, you try to complain, and you're just thrown in circles again and again. So what does that look like? Who do you want to call, and how do you want them to be required by law to respond to you? So that accountability is one, and it's not just for industry, it's for the government as well, absolutely. Where do you want those emissions records to be held? If a new facility is coming in and they are doing continuous monitoring of every single pollutant coming out of their facility, should they be allowed to just keep those on site and you never could request them because it's not a public record? Or do you want those held on your agency? Do you want those publicly available online so you can see when a violation occurs and someone can hold them accountable? So accountability. And then justice also. What does justice look like when something goes wrong, when all the things the industry said, these things don't happen, they're rare, they don't happen. When they do happen, because they do happen, I see them all the time in my office, they happen. What do you want to happen? Who has the burden to prove that wrong has been done to them or that wrong has occurred? And what does it take to prove that? And so these are questions that, sure, a lawyer is the one, or more likely, a lobbyist is the one writing this language out. But still, as lay people, I think we need to take responsibility for visioning what that accountability, what we would want it to be, and then what we would want the justice to be. So you're not supposed to degrade water quality. In general, the Clean Water Act says no, you can never degrade water quality. But if you have a permit to do so, you can. But you must follow the permit to do so. And in order to get that permit, first you have to show that there's significant economic and social need to do so. Then you can degrade water quality. But still, you cannot degrade existing uses. So if Joe goes down there and fishes every day and gets this one type of fish, and then this discharge is going to make that fish go away, no, we can't do that. You could argue that that's an existing use and they're eliminating it. But they can degrade the water up until the point it would mess with existing uses. So that's why it's important to have your evidence. And that's why it might seem like it's not a big deal, but it is absolutely a big deal to know what you love in your environment and what you value in your environment. It is indeed true that there are certain requirements under the Safe Drinking Water Act. So there's an underground injection control program under the Safe Drinking Water Act that essentially production wells are exempt from. So they do not have to go through the same type of analysis when applying for a permit. They don't even have to apply for a permit under that act. So you just have zero scrutiny that would otherwise take place to any other type of underground injection except for this. So that's a real thing. That's a thing that would be an obvious thing to fix. I mean, I think that there are endless exemptions. So for example, the waste from hydraulic fracturing, by and large, is exempt from RCRA, which is our solid waste protection statute. So that's a huge statute that you could, as a citizen, enforce yourself. And you can't enforce the regulations under that because they don't apply to oil and gas waste. Again, there are some legal hooks that you can get into the nitty-gritty of, but by and large, in terms of how the industry is being looked at by regulators and how the industry is behaving, it is under that assumption that, yes, they're exempt from both RCRA and the Safe Drinking Water Act. And notice, I did not say the Clean Water Act, so I do not want anyone to feel like if you see the oil and gas industry doing something terrible to the environment, that there is nothing you can do, because that is not true. There are things that you can do legally, but it is true that it is harder because of certain exemptions that were given, so there are not as many angles to go after them. There are violations of these air permits everywhere. They are everywhere. If I had all the clients in the world, I could just go around or all the time in the world. I do have the clients to do it. All the time in the world, I could just go around and litigate Clean Air Act violations all day, every day. So this is another thing to understand. Yes, you have some environmental laws that are still strong that protect you. Yes, they have a lot of holes in them that can be a really big deal, but you still have some very good laws. But third, that agencies have discretion and they have limited resources. So just because the agency says that something is in compliance or that there's no problem with them does not mean that that is true. I'm not saying the agency is lying. I'm just saying there are violations everywhere. So when you're thinking about what accountability looks like and what justice looks like with regard to living with industry, just know that. No, right now, agencies are way past capacity. They are not able to enforce the permits they are issuing. That is the reality.